Wisteria, Energy Twister.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This ghost story is actually called Ghosts of the Wayside. It's true that many well-known ghosts are old-fashioned creatures, apparently endlessly taking part in a shadowy costume drama. Apparitions of cavaliers, roundheads, still fighting the Civil War. The restless wives of Henry, yes, the Henry VIII, flit noisily between the royal palaces they once knew, and no stately home or manor house worthy of the name lacks its grey or white lady in her shadowy Elizabethan or Victorian garb. But the ghosts do move with the times, not least the phantoms which haunt not only quiet country lanes but busy motorways. There are many stories of encounters with mysterious hitchhikers, unexpected passengers whose behaviour suggests to the startled witness they are not of this world. Near the Wickford roundabout, on the South End bypass, a young girl was killed in a motorcycle accident, but by all accounts she's still sometimes seen thumbing a lift. Motorists on motorcycles, whichever, would have stopped to help her, and they say she has to go to Victoria Circus, Southend. But before they reach her destination, they are shocked to find that their passenger has disappeared without a trace. There are several instances of mysterious passengers who simply appear unannounced in the back of a car. On November afternoon in 1993, a young woman was driving home along the B1052 road between Saffron Walden and Hadstock. Part of the road once formed a section of the runway of the wartime airfield, and as she reached this point, she saw a flash of light and heard a siren. Thinking that a fire engine or ambulance would be approaching, she slowed down and looked in her mirror, and to her utter astonishment, she could see an American Air Force pilot in flying kit sitting on the back seat. Unable to believe her own eyes, she skidded to a halt and, heart thumping with fright, nervously looked once again in her mirror. But this time the back seat was empty. She sat there for a few minutes, her thoughts racing, trying to regain her composure. Had she really seen a wartime American pilot looking at her from the back seat of her car? She was familiar with the road and realised that she had stopped the car on a level with the old control tower of the airfield. When she felt calmer and was reassured that the back seat was empty, as it ought to be, she drove home, trying to convince herself that her imagination had been playing tricks. But had it? There is a sequel to this strange story. A few days afterwards, while she was cleaning out her car, the young woman picked up a small object from the back seat. It was a button later identified as one from the American flying jacket. If any skeptic feels inclined to dismiss this happening as moonshine, perhaps they should consider the following. On November afternoon in 1943, Captain Robert Schultz of the 8th USAAF was returning to Little Walden Airfield in his Mustang fighter plane. It actually says fighter, but I think it means fighter. I think maybe there's a mark in the book. I apologise. It had developed engine trouble over the channel, but using all his skill, he had managed to reach his base. The emergency services waited anxiously as he circled around, his engine spluttering badly. But at last he approached the runway and landed. The relief of those watching turned to horror as the Mustang suddenly swerved off course and exploded in flames, with no chance of saving Captain Schultz's life. This strange story poses a question not so easy to answer. Could it possibly be that, on the 50th anniversary of the accident, for one brief moment in time, a young woman passing the site of that tragic event encountered the spirit of Captain Robert Schultz? Other grim stories are associated with the Hold Hadstock Aerodrome, which make it no place to linger on a misty winter's evening. Any motorists approaching Hadstock Village on the B1052 is advised to keep going if they notice an airman who appears to be hitching a lift. For if you pause, you will discover to your horror that he has no head. And you should notice a ball of flames rolling towards the old control tower. Don't investigate that. You're witnessing a ghostly replay of a tragic day in the last war when a young airman was shot down in flames. Here is another story of someone who found they had unwittingly acquired an unknown passenger. The driver was passing Oasis Priory Gate House, west of Clacton, early one morning in 1991, when, glancing in his mirror, he was amazed to find an unknown middle-aged lady sitting on the back seat. Startled as he was, he registered that she was dressed in clothes of old-fashioned style and wore a hat with a small posy of flowers on one side. He pulled up intending to ask, "Who are you?" But when he looked round, the back seat was completely empty. Well, had the passenger flown out? He got out of his car and looked up and down the road. There was no one in sight. And when he opened the back door of the car and looked inside, he immediately noticed a strong smell of violets. He then recalled with a sense of shock the little bunch of flowers on his strange passenger's hat. They were violets, of course. But how? Why and who? Like other drivers who suddenly discover that they are not alone, he was left wondering. Ghostly passengers are alarming enough, but their reports of phantom vehicles too. On June evening, a report apparently was made at Thorrington. A filling station cashier sat watching her video monitor. There was something she couldn't quite understand. On the screen, she could see a car standing on the forecourt with a man beside it. But as she watched, it seemed to her that cars coming and going were passing straight through them. She was unable to leave her position, so she asked a customer to look at the monitor and tell her what she saw. The customer said she could actually see a man and his car on the forecourt. So the cashier asked if she would mind going outside and just walking past the car. The customer went, and on the video monitor the cashier watched her approach the car and apparently walk straight through it. But when she returned, the customer reported to the puzzled cashier that the forecourt was completely empty. By this time, another interested customer had joined them and suggested that there must be something wrong with the monitor or the tape, which could be showing a previous recording. So the cashier changed the tape. But when they looked, the car was still there in the video as before. However, this time, after a little while, it faded, and the cashier thought that was the end of this puzzling happening. Not so. The same thing happened on the next evening and the next. The image of a car appeared at around 9 p.m, as it had done the first time. Gradually, over time, it faded away, the course of 22 minutes or so, and eventually it failed to appear at all. There were several witnesses to this odd manifestation, but how or why it happened, we may never know. Some of the most alarming encounters on the roads of this country are ghostly jaywalkers, who have an unnerving habit of appearing suddenly in front of passing vehicles, causing the driver to slam on the brakes, often too late to avoid a collision. The story is nearly always the same. The shocked driver jumps out, expecting to find a pedestrian injured or worse. But to his amazement, there is nobody to be found. Was he dreaming? Was it perhaps a shadow or a passing bird which created the illusion? Many an unfortunate driver is left puzzled and shaken by his unnerving experience. Before I end this part, I'd like to mention Stocksbridge bypass, because I have a story. I wasn't there when it happened. I was only told it afterwards by a family member, and this was actually before I was born, so I was born 82, so it was probably somewhere 1970s, late 70s, I would think. But it was before I was born, I know that. And apparently he was driving down Stocksbridge bypass when he apparently saw a monk in the back of his car. But the smell that came with this monk was like the smell of a pipe burning, when people smoke pipes and tobacco in there. Well, yeah, that was the smell he smelt when he saw this monk in the back of his car. And he looked like a monk. He couldn't think what else it would be. And it didn't cause him to have an accident or anything like that. But it was there 1 minute and gone the next. But the smell did linger for some time. Why it was the smell of a pipe, I don't know. But he absolutely says this absolutely happened as he was going through Stocks Bridge bypass in the UK. And as far as I know, there are other stories relating to this particular monk. So they seem to think it is a monk anyway. But yeah, that's just a passing story that I heard from someone in the family. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I do tend to believe this person though, so it is interesting. But, maybe he was thinking about it as he passed and it created something, I don't know. Anyway, that's the first part of the Ghosts of the Wayside. We shall continue next time. Many blessings. Wisteria, energy, twister.